You're good to go, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Om Adgyana Timanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhiraya. Thank you for having me. We'll dive right into the Srimad Bhagavatam 1030.8. Let me share my screen. So I'll go through the Sanskrit and the verses up until verse 10, and then we could do call and response. Malatyadar Shivat Kachchin Malike Jati Yutike Pritim Vojana Yanyata Kadasparshena Madavaha. O Malati, O Malika, O Jati, and Yutika, has Madhava gone by here, giving you pleasure with the touch of his hand? Purport. When even Tulsi herself did not answer the gopis, they approached the fragrant jasmine flowers. The gopis, seeing the jasmine vines humbly bowing down, assumed that these plants must have seen Lord Krishna and were therefore showing humility in their ecstasy. Chuta Priyala Panasa Sasa Sanako Vidada Jamvarka Bilva Bakulam Rakadamba Nipaha Yene Parartha Pavaka Yamuno Pakula Shamsantu Krishna Padavim Rahitatmanamna. O Chuta, O Priyala, O Panasa, Asana, and Kovidar, O Jambu, O Arka, O Bilva, Bakula, and Amra, O Kadamba and Nipa, and all you other plants and trees living by the banks of the Yamuna, who have dedicated your very existence to the welfare of others, we gopis have lost our minds, so please tell us where Krishna has gone. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Chuta is a mango creeper, whereas the Amra is a mango tree. He goes on to explain that the Nipa, though not a very prominent tree, bears large flowers, and that the gopis' desperation to find Krishna is clearly shown by the fact that they approach the insignificant arka plant. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives the following information about Vrindavan's trees. The Nipa is the dust kadamba, and it has large flowers. The kadamba proper has smaller flowers and a very pleasant fragrance. The kovidar is a particular kind of kanchanar, mountain ebony tree. Even though the arka plant is very insignificant, it always grows near Lord Gopishwara, the Shiva deity in Vrindavan forest, because it is dear to him. Now we could call and response. Kim te kritam kshititapo bhatta keshavangri.
Kim te kritam kshititapo bhatta keshavangri.
Sparshotsavot pulakitanga naher vibhasi.
Sparshotsavot pulakitanga naher vibhasi.
Apyangri
Apyangri sambhava urukrama vikramava.
Aho varaha vapusha parirambhanena.
Aho varaha vapusha parirambhanena.
Kim, what? Te, by you. Kritam, performed. Kriti, O earth. Tapa, austerity. Bhatta, indeed, Keshava, of Lord Krishna, Angri, by the feet, Sparsha, on account of being touched, Utsava, due to the joyful experience, Ut Pulakita, standing on end in jubilation, Anga Ruhai, with your bodily hairs, the grass, and growing plants on your surface. Vibhasi, you appear beautiful, Api, perhaps, Angri, by the feet of Krishna present now on your surface, Sambhava, generated, Urukrama, of Lord Vamanadev, Lord Krishna's dwarf incarnation, who covered the entire universe in 3 mighty steps. Vikramat, because of the stepping, Va, or Aha U, or else perhaps Varaha, of Lord Krishna's incarnation as a boar, Vapushaha, by the body, Parirambhanena, because of the embrace. Translation, O Mother Earth, what austerity did you perform to attain the touch of Lord Keshava's lotus feet, which has brought you such great joy that your bodily hairs are standing on end? You appear very beautiful in this condition. Was it during the Lord's current appearance that you acquired this ecstatic symptom? Or was it perhaps much earlier, when he stepped upon you in his form of the dwarf Vamanadev, or even earlier, when he embraced you in his form of the boar Varahadev? Purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains the thoughts of the gopis as follows. Quote, perhaps the trees and plants mentioned in the previous verses did not hear our question because they were in trance meditating on Lord Vishnu. Or perhaps, since they will not tell us where Krishna has gone, they are hard-hearted, even though they live in a holy place. Anyway, what is the use of unnecessarily criticizing the residents of a holy place? We cannot tell if they really know where Krishna has gone, so let us find someone who definitely knows where he is. Thus the gopis concluded that since Lord Krishna had to be somewhere on the earth herself must know his whereabouts. Then the gopis thought, since Krishna always walks on the earth, she is never separated from him, and thus cannot understand how much his parents, girlfriends, and servants suffer in his absence. Let us ask her what austerities she has performed to gain the great fortune of being constantly touched by the feet of Lord Keshava. Om Adgyanitirmanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Shrayam Rupa Kadhamayam Vedati Shvapadanti Tam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Vagunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Takta Kanchana Gaudangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, what an amazing place in the Bhagavatam to step in, and so many different ways in which we could go. But the way that I'd like to go today, for the most part, and is a way that I feel is extremely important to at least consider. In the Krishna consciousness movement, typically we're instructed not to dwell too much on this particular aspect of the process. But I think from time to time, and perhaps even once a day, it's extremely important to be reminded of things like this, where it says here, "What austerity did you perform, O Mother Earth, to attain the touch of Lord Keshava's lotus feet, which has brought you such great joy that your bodily hairs are standing on end? You appear very beautiful in this condition. Was it during the Lord's current appearance that you acquired this ecstatic symptom? Or was it perhaps earlier when he stepped on you in his form of the dwarf Vamanadev, or even earlier when he embraced you in his form of the boar Varahadev?" So throughout the Bhagavatam, we are given glimpses into what it means to truly have love for Krishna, and specifically what the symptoms of that love can be. And so things like we see here, bodily hairs standing on end, tears coming from the eyes, rippulations on the body in some more extreme cases. But in any case, these are things that we as devotees can, by the mercy of our spiritual master and Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, can experience. And while we're not instructed to kind of dwell on them too much, it's a fact that this is a kind of defining characteristic of our process. So much so that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this is actually what makes Krishna consciousness the king of all philosophies, the king of religion, that you can have pratyaksha, or this direct experience of Krishna. So here we're being shown what that direct experience of Krishna will often look like. The fact is that we hear in the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, it's a very basic tenet of our philosophy, that we're not these bodies. And so as spirit souls stuck within the material body, every so often it may happen that we experience something that our bodily situation isn't so well equipped to handle. And that's when we start having these involuntary reactions to those spiritual influences. And so we see extreme examples, especially in the body of Lord Chaitanya. If you read the Antya-lila, especially the last few chapters, we're given these extreme descriptions of what Lord Chaitanya was experiencing as he was in these close connections with Krishna. It's described that he would somehow or other escape his confines at the Gambhira and often find himself somewhere else within Jagannath Puri, very often over by the Singadwar gate, which was just in front of Lord Jagannath's temple. There's one particular instance in which he finds himself there, and he has an ecstatic bodily transformation, which can be shocking to people. I won't go too deep into it right now because this is a general class, but I encourage everybody to take a look at that particular chapter, the Lord's ecstatic bodily transformations in the Antya-lila. And what's described there is that he was meditating on Krishna, and in his mind's eye, in his heart, he was in Vrindavan, and he was viewing these different pastimes that were going on between the divine couple and their most intimate associates, and it caused his body to have a kind of reaction, that extreme experience. And the devotees were very worried to see Lord Chaitanya in that condition, because it can be quite shocking to see somebody in that kind of state. And so what they did was they started chanting Hare Krishna in his ear. And Lord Chaitanya describes that I was there, I was in a grove of Vrindavan, and I was seeing these intimate pastimes of the divine couple, and suddenly I started hearing this roaring going on in the distance, and eventually it woke me from that state. And then he returned to his normal consciousness, and the devotees were pacified. But the fact remains that these are things that aren't just meant for histories or recountings of different great personalities. That by sincerely following the process of Krishna consciousness and developing one's love for Krishna through the basic processes of hearing and chanting about him, associating with devotees, then we too can receive pratyaksha, or these direct experiences of Krishna. And at least by my estimation, this is what kind of keeps me around. Not that I'm, having these kinds of experiences, but the fact that they're available. And it's not just that we have to wait until we die to figure out whether or not this whole thing is real or not, right? It's like we could be philosophically convinced, about the tenets of the Krishna conscious philosophy that, oh yeah, that makes sense. Any question I ask, there will be a logical and intrinsically satisfying answer. That's one aspect of it. But the other thing that really convinced me, and that continues to convince me, is when I hear of these experiences that different devotees have, in which they're in direct contact with Krishna by the mercy of the spiritual master. So it's a very valuable thing. It's something that we should strive for, ultimately. It may be daunting to think about these kinds of things and to consider where I am today, and the mountain that I'm hoping to climb to get to a point where I could be in such close contact with Krishna on a regular basis. But without having that standard to strive for, then we could end up kind of floating aimlessly in the ocean of anartha-nivritti. Unless we have that clear target that we're striving towards, then it could take a very long time for us to get there, right? It's like, if you're in an ocean and the current is ultimately pulling you towards this particular shore, then eventually, after a long period of time, it's quite possible you'll reach that shore. But if you know where the shore is, if you have an able captain, like the spiritual master, who can guide you in your journey, and you have the determination to row ahead, then it'll be a much quicker process, and you'll be able to also see your progress as you go, and it won't be just kind of this aimless hoping that you're moving closer towards this destination, but you'll be able to watch yourself gradually get there. In fact, I remember I was in Miami at the Coconut Grove Temple there a few years back, right before COVID. Me and my wife, Mani Manjari, who everybody knows now, given that I had her name as my Zoom account there for a second. But in any case, we were visiting Miami with my family, little family vacation. And every morning we would drive to the ISKCON temple at Coconut Grove. And we noticed that it was the same pujari every day, and there was only one other person who was in the temple besides him. And so we took note of that, and we're thinking, wow, this person is doing all this deity worship by himself. And mind you, for anyone who's been there, it's a very big altar as well. It's, if I remember correctly, 3 very large sets of deities. There's a big Gaur Nitai, a big Radha Krishna, and a big Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. And there's a decently sized Nrsimhadev deity, and also a big Varahadev deity, as well as different Shilas. And so this one person was doing all that worship every single day. And he seemed older. I assumed he was a Prabhupada disciple. And eventually, one of the last days that we were there, he came off the altar and he gave us a plate of the Maha fruit. And so then we got to talking. And it's not always easy to tell. I think when someone is really advanced, but I think it's easy to tell when someone is not really advanced. But in this case, I felt it was easy to tell that this person was on a high level of Krishna consciousness. For one, he was obviously quite steady. Seemed like he had been doing the service his entire life. And for two, I could just see in his demeanor that he wasn't trying to impress me or anybody. It felt like that he was, he just had this air about him that felt like he was completely humble and had this incredible service attitude. It's like we hear these descriptions about the spiritual world where it says that time is conspicuous by its absence. I think in certain devotees, you can feel that the ego is conspicuous by its absence, or the false ego, or you could say pride is conspicuous by its absence. I could just see when talking to this person that he was different. I could just feel that he was someone I could trust. So we get to talking, and it turns out that, yes, for the past 40 years or something like that, he and his wife have been stationed at the Miami temple. He had been given that service to be the pujari there, and he never left. He had been serving the deities, him and his wife, for the past 40 years. And different people had also come and gone who could help, but I think it was for the past 10 years or so, it was just him and her. And they would alternate. So one day he would do the deity worship, she would make the garlands, and the next day he would make the garlands, and she would do the deity worship. And they went on like that for a decade and probably more as other people came and gone. And so to see someone of that caliber with that kind of steadiness, determination, and ultimately what it ultimately means is with that kind of taste that they could go on like that, living such a simple life. The temple had given them a car and rented them an apartment, and their life was just worshiping the deities, taking care of the deities in the temple. But to see somebody who had that level of commitment and realization and taste was something extraordinary. And I felt obliged to ask him, how did you do it? Right? It's funny, we see these videos sometimes on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, where people go up to millionaires and ask, how did you do it? How did you make that first $1 million? You know, but as devotees, we have that similar mentality, but it's directed towards people who may not have any money at all, but have an abundant wealth of Krishna consciousness and taste and love for Krishna. And so as an aspiring devotee, I felt inclined to ask him, how did you do it? And the answer he gave me was extremely profound and extremely satisfying, as we see with many of the answers we get from realized souls in Krishna consciousness. But what he ultimately said was that you continue on mastering the simple process. And so hearing and chanting, remembering Krishna, associating with devotees, reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, associating with like-minded devotees who are more advanced than yourself. These are the essential tenets given in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And he said, by doing that sincerely and with determination, then over time you can watch yourself progress throughout these different stages of bhakti. And you can watch yourself move higher and higher as you get more and more of a taste for Krishna consciousness and less of a taste for material life. So that's huge, to have a simple process by which we can actually watch ourselves advance in the path. But to go back to the boat analogy, you can think of those things as as paddles, or I don't know if paddle is also, I guess, yeah, paddle is a verb. So you could think of it as paddles in the right direction. But in order to understand that right direction, we also need an able captain. And so that's where the spiritual master comes in. So, for example, we may uh, be especially inclined towards a particular service, or we may be disinclined towards another kind of service. But oftentimes we see that just because we may have some particular inclination doesn't necessarily mean that that's the super soul guiding us. It could often be our mind guiding us, that our mind wants to accept or reject this particular service or that particular service because of what we feel is best for our sense gratification, or whatever is easiest, or whatever would give us the most ease and the least amount of resistance. So it's important to have somebody who can tell us that, no, actually, you should do that service, or no, actually, you shouldn't do that service. And that's where the spiritual master comes in. So um, there's many instances of this, but I hate to talk about myself. I feel like I do that a lot somehow. But I was never particularly inclined towards book distribution. I was more inclined towards studying and writing, editing, stuff like that, which I still do. But I received an instruction from my spiritual master that you should focus on book distribution. You should master the art of book distribution. And after I received that instruction, it took me a while to really embrace it. And for a while there, I struggled in Krishna consciousness and struggled to really be steady and to feel a kind of um, consistent enthusiasm in my practice. And it wasn't until I really took up that instruction that everything changed for me, and I was able to become, uh, you know, not as bad as I am now. I could say like that. Um, but the point is that I wasn't particularly inclined towards book distribution. I was always more of an introvert, more inclined towards, again, studying, reading, writing, discussing philosophical points with devotees, stuff like that. And book distribution was just something I did because I felt like Prabhupada liked it, and so I felt, that I should every so often, try and do something like that for him. But no matter how much writing and editing and studying, etc., that I did, it wasn't until I started carrying out that uncomfortable instruction to some small extent that I really could become somewhat steady. So it's oftentimes difficult to distinguish between the mind and the heart and what Supersoul is actually telling us to do. But if we have that spiritual master and we have an attitude of surrender to him, not saying that I did, but eventually it was kind of forced upon me because it wasn't working without it. Unless we have that, then it's very easy to go astray and do things that may appear to be helpful to our devotional service, but that ultimately aren't conducive. But yes, the fact is that when we do have both those things, the favorable form of proper hearing and chanting, giving proper attention to our japa every day, and the guidance of the spiritual master, who can guide us in times of difficulty or in times of confusion, or especially in times where we feel like we may be better off doing this, but actually we should be doing that. Then slowly and steadily, for a long time, Kapila Dev says to his mother, to Devahuti. Devahuti asks him, how do we get out of this material entanglement that we've been in for since time immemorial, billions of lifetimes? And Lord Kapila Dev says, well, you have to perform devotional service, you have to hear, especially for a long time. But of course, the thing is that when we do it nicely, then we can watch ourselves progress, and it's not just like, a never-ending, purgatory. But we're actually watching ourselves get more of a taste for Krishna consciousness. We're having more of these kinds of experiences. And by so doing, then eventually we get to this point in which we're on the platform of bhava, where we have this indelible taste for hearing about Krishna, for chanting about Krishna, to the point where we become emotional. But to say emotional is not really the right word for it. There's so many instances like this where a Sanskrit term, especially a bhakti term, doesn't really have an English equivalent. But we get to this point in which the love within our heart that's eternally there for Krishna becomes more and more awakened. And finally, we're able to perform devotional service in its true meaning, with love for Krishna. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. You could check the chat here.
If you open the share of the verse, we can see the other people, yeah? Fantastic class, but with your sincerity and your faith, and especially your mentioning of your spiritual master is so refreshing. And we see, by the example of the spiritual master, look at Vaisheshika Prabhu, it's nothing casual. It's not part-time. He's absorbed, he's dedicated, he's focused on service to the spiritual master. And almost in the material world, we think, oh, that's not possible. I have to do something for my maintenance. But if it says that if we just dedicate ourselves to Krishna consciousness, our maintenance is there as a byproduct. And that's a very radical thought, to hear that and to have faith in that. In the Buddhist tradition, it says, first, you must know what's right. Then, you must want it. Right? That's an interesting step. First you know what's right, then you want it. Then you actually speak about it. It's not just something inside your mind, but you actually say, you know, this is something that is important for us to have as our priority. Then, after wanting it and talking about it, then we start to engage in right behavior. We start to engage in some sadhana, some devotional service. And then there's a thing called right livelihood, which means that devotional service becomes our job. Sometimes they say to the devotees, why don't you get a real job? You know? As if we don't have a job, you know. We have to have another job to maintain ourselves, you know. And what we see is, Vaisheshika Prabhu is doing it, Prabhupada is doing it. He put aside other desires, other activities, other expenditures of time and energy and finances and resources and abilities, and he just engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. And that's what's so refreshing. What I was astounded by was to see the devotees who moved in the temple, who did full-time devotional service, you know. And when we see these temples that have nobody in them but a pujari who's being paid, and it's wonderful to see that because the deities are beautiful and being taken care of, and the congregation is certainly there giving donations. But to have one foot in the material world and one foot in the spiritual world is a little dangerous. It's like having one foot on the boat and one foot on the dock, and the boat starts moving, you know? So to see somebody who's doing that, and to see somebody who you're taking shelter of calling you to do that, and then to desire it, and talk about it, and start to do it, and then progressively move in that direction, ahaitukiya pratiyata, unceasing, unmotivated devotional service, the only thing that will satisfy the self. And it's a life, I've seen devotees who live like that. You've seen devotees who live like that. And to believe that it's possible and to move in that direction is where we really have to go. Anyway, maybe I'm talking too much. Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for your class. Your sincerity comes right through, and I want to become like you when I grow up.
Yeah, right. Hare Krishna, you never talk too much. Oh, you never talk too much. Everything you say is better than anything else I've ever heard, or at least on that same absolute platform as the other things. Thank you. Damodar Priya, congratulations.
Hare Krishna, dear Anupam Das Prabhu, thank you so much. And I look, Ananda Vihari is showing us his dear wife, Haribo. I actually had a question. So I think it is very inspiring to hear about those high ideals, like those who can like live in the temple and do that full time. However, the majority of us that attend these classes are not ready for that, are not at that point. So I was wondering if you could speak to those of us who either are in the Grihastha ashram, so we're married, we have our own separate home, we're not planning on moving into the temple anytime soon, or people who are maybe just very new to bhakti, which we have a lot of people who attend the classes who are, perhaps don't have a spiritual master yet. So can you speak to that and kind of give us some hope in terms of not getting discouraged by knowing of that ideal and knowing that we're not anywhere in that? So if you could speak to that, that would be really great. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Sure. Yeah, my spiritual master, I think I mentioned this before in class, I'll say it again though. My spiritual master told us that he's a Grihastha. And he said that the title to his biography would be Rice, Dal, and Chapatis, Mastering the Basics. And so what that means to me is that we may not be able to go on book distribution or Harinam Sankirtan, for 6 hours a day, every day, and go to Mangal Arti at 4:30 in the morning every morning. But what we can do is understand the basics as they are and follow that simple process very strictly. And by doing the simple thing with great care and attention, then the results become amplified by billions of times, as opposed to somebody who's trying to do too much and then not doing those things with the same amount of care and attention and sincerity. And so one way we could do that is, for example, we may not be able to chant all 16 rounds in the morning before we start our day every single day. It may not be, especially for Grihastas, stay up late for whatever reason because of kids or because we had to work late or, different events, gatherings, whatever it might be. And then we got work in the morning. And so, we may not have all the time that we would desire to just sit down and chant. But even if we just have 30 minutes in the morning that we can really intensely chant, just block off 30 minutes where we can really go deep. And then the rest, we get them done as we can, just, as best we can. But a little bit of, even a little block of time in which we really intensely perform our practice can give us that iota of taste that will last us throughout the day, that will give us the inspiration and the faith to stay in a mood of remembrance towards Krishna throughout the day. And those little blocks that are there will add up over time. It's kind of like compounding interest. Like in the material world, you put a little bit away every single day into an investment account, and then over the years, then you see it's multiplied hundreds of times. And so in the same way, if we put a little bit, even a little block of time, we put, give our full heart every single day, then that will be amplified over the years. And then we'll end up like Adi Purush Prabhu or Vaisheshika Prabhu.
Srila Prabhupada says, you do your best and Krishna is pleased. We must know what the goal is and do our sincere best, because the criteria is not this or that, except is Krishna pleased. And we say, Krishna, I'm yours, I'm doing the best I can. Krishna is pleased, and then we're successful. Anybody can be successful. They do their humble best based on their situation. But we shouldn't forget about where we're going with this. Full dedication to Krishna, to the spiritual master's mission.
I think I know why Adipusha Prabhu had to shave his head. His hair was standing on end and he couldn't function. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is standing on end. Yeah, yeah. That's right. Bhima Prabhu is making his hair stand on end by pulling it up. Right, Bhima Prabhu? Yes. Make it stand. We're going to name this class, Make Your Hair Stand.
I always have to.
Go ahead, Bhim. What do you do?
I do that because I'm in a complete split with 1 foot on the dock of material life and 1 foot in the boat of spiritual life. So I'm in a complete split.
One devotee once told me, I'm 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot on the banana peel. That's our situation in the material world. Yeah. Nice class, Anupama Prabhu. Wonderful. Determination means taste. That's my personal takeaway. Thank you for breaking that up for us. Yeah, full surrender 1 minute a day, but full surrender every day for 1 minute, just for starters. Then make it 2 minutes, but every day. Yeah. I'm going to surrender for just 1 minute today. I'll let you know how it was. I'll report back tomorrow. Just 1 minute. I can do that. Yeah, Grihastha means complications, but it's doable. It's doable. Okay, do we have any other questions or reflections from our audience? You're so wonderful, dear devotees. You chose to be here on this Sunday morning. It's worth it. It's always worth it when we choose to be with Krishna. Let me see if I can call out somebody. Let me see. Susan, can you share? How are you doing, Susan? We see you here every day. We want to hear from you today, if you can, please. Susan, how's your acupuncture going? 1 needle a day, right?
I don't
Susan,
know
we
if
know
she's
you.
available, but I can glorify Susan for
Yeah.
if you would like. So as a lot of people know, I had my Harinam initiation on Tuesday, the beginning of Purushottama Mass, which was such a blessing. And ahead of time of the initiation, Susan Prabhu sent me as a gift the 3 books of the Seat of Fire trilogy, which is this beautiful 3-book series written by a Prabhupada disciple. I forget her name, but I know that her daughter is Vrindashe, who did the art. And she sent that to me with so much love and blessings for my initiation. And I want to glorify Susan for that. But also just that she's in that spirit of the loving exchanges between devotees. And you know how important it is, not just of giving of gifts, but of giving of love and giving of confidence and sharing with each other. And even if you can't turn on your video or your sound, Susan, like we know that you're always here blessing us with your presence and always honoring us, you know, by coming to class. So thank you so much. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, maybe she's with a client, you know, doing the acupuncture. Who knows? All glories to Susan Prabhu, all glories to Anupama, Damodar Priya Prabhu, Bhima, Adi Prabhu, Scarlet, Yogeshwari, Venisha. Thank you so much, everyone. Bruce Prabhu, Jamuna Jaya Radhamadava. That's her full name. Rich, Amita Kishori, Domi, Dana, Krishna's Radharani, Manjari.
Govindam Purusham Tamaham Tami Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Kandarpam Aravinda Dalaya Daksham Bhagavatam Sam Asitam Purasundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govinda Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Anjali Asya Sakale Kriya Vritti Mamsi Pasyanti Pan Kalyanti Shiram Jaganti Shimaya Sadhu Tvala Vigrahasya Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I have to go. Hari Purusham Tamaham Govinda Hari Purusham Tamaham.
Oh, thank you so much. So nice. I'm not sure I heard. I hope I can. Can I be heard? Can you hear me? Damodar
I
Priya,
can
can
hear
you hear
you
me?
now. Yeah.
Right, Chuck. Nice. Okay. Yeah, what a wonderful devotee Anupama Prabhu is. He's so serene, so sattvic, so handsome. And his class was in line with Guru Sadhu and Shastra, so inspiring. Right. Okay. All right. I have to keep going. It was nice seeing you, nice spending this time with you, dear Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis and Vaishnavets and all the animals and everybody on the scroll. Kijai to you. Hare Krishna. See you again tomorrow. Thank you, Damodar Priya, for backing me up. Thank you. Hare Krishna.